Hello my lovelies, I hope you're all well and I hope you had a lovely Easter. Today we're going to be watching some Jordan Peterson, maybe some good news. It says the world is doing much better than we're being told, so grab yourselves a drink. It's a lovely sunny day here, a little bit windy, but I hope that you've got some sunshine wherever you are. Okay, let's see what Jordan Peterson has to say.
Do you have any forward-looking views on where we're going?
All debate, this whole, what you've been going through for the last few years, every argument you've had. Do you have any sort of midterm to long-term view on where we're going? Or if you don't, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, we're going in many directions at once. And the question is the fundamental trajectory downhill or uphill? And I would say that depends on you.
Western society in particular.
What's that?
Western society.
Yes. No, and more globally. I worked on the UN Secretary General's report on sustainable development for about 2 years and read a very large number of texts on environmental.
Just on a different note, I know he has a tour coming up, or he might already be on the tour, but it's coming to the UK soon, and I would just love to go. I would love to go. Don't think it's going to be on the cards, but I just imagine being in the room while he's talking and then getting to meet him afterwards. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Problems and opportunities and economic development. And what happened to me was that I got way more optimistic than I was before I started reading those books.
Oh.
So many things have happened in the last 40 years that are so good, you just can't believe it. We've lifted more people out of abject poverty in the last 15 years than in the entire course of human history, in terms of sheer numbers of people. And starvation, except for political reasons, is now pretty much absent across the world. There hasn't been any wars in the Western Hemisphere for about a decade. That's really something, and no major wars plague us at the moment. That's quite something, given that there are 7 billion of us, and there's only going to be 9 billion, by all appearances. It's going to peak out at about 9 billion, and my suspicions are in 100 years, one of the biggest problems we'll face is that there's just not enough people. And you never hear that, but I really do believe it's likely to be the case. Wow. And we can certainly carry 9...
You never hear that. You never hear people say that. All I ever hear people saying is that there's too many people and it's unsustainable and we're killing the planet because there's too many people. So that's very interesting because he's obviously had the inside line on this stuff. He's done the research. He's been part of these research groups. So that's very interesting to hear that side of things.
Billion people without doing the planet undue environmental damage. And people who claim otherwise, I think a lot of things about that. But one of the things I don't think is that that's an accurate viewpoint. We're doing far better than we were 40 years ago feeding people, and we can certainly pack in another 2 billion. It turns out that if you want to control population, though I wouldn't really recommend that as an occupation, all you have to do is educate women, and that's the end of that problem. Then you also
what? That puts me in mind of something Christopher Hitchens used to say. Are you aware of Christopher Hitchens? If not, I highly recommend you look up some of his stuff, because he was just this amazing intellectual and thinker, and the way he used to do a lot of debates and lectures and stuff, kind of similar to Jordan, except a lot of his stuff was on the atheist side of things. So he would debate against religious people in terms of morality and stuff like that. But one thing he said that really stuck with me, actually, he's no longer with us, sadly. But one thing he said was the way to lift people out of poverty is educating women and giving them some control over their reproduction. He said, if you do those things, you just watch what happens. The whole country, just everything goes up, everything improves just by women's education and a little bit of control over their reproduction. So, just not having women pump out kid after kid.
educated women, and we know that's very annoying, but it seems to be, it seems to be working out. It's a great predictor of general economic development. It's actually, I think, the best predictor of a society's future economic development is the attitude that they hold towards the education of women. And luckily, it's in the positive direction, and so that's very cool.
Yeah,
and
I think there's like more women go into higher education than men now. I might be wrong on that, but I think that that's the case. And I know that like the general, like how schools work seems to do better for women, like for girls. I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know.
It certainly seems to be the case that the fastest way out of a given environmental conundrum is to make absolutely poor people richer as fast as you possibly can. Before. Because then they do things like, well, they don't burn wood anymore. Maybe they burn coal, and I know coal is evil, but it's not as evil as wood.
Isn't evil.
And I don't know if you know this, but 1.6 million children die every year because of the indoor pollution that wood burning causes. Yeah. It's like if the nuclear industry had a record like that, that would be all...
I heard him say that on Joe Rogan podcast that he was on. I can't remember which episode though, but I think it was the last time he was on there. They were talking about a lot of things. They were talking about environmental stuff, and he did mention about all of these excess deaths of children by indoor pollution levels because their poor families are having to burn wood and stuff, and the particulates, the pollution, it unfortunately makes these children very ill.
Over the newspapers, but they're just third world children after all. So, the planet has too many people on it anyways. And so there's all sorts of things I see that are so radically positive that it beggars description. I mean, India and China alone have greened an area because of agricultural transformation the size of the Amazon, and partly as a consequence of increased carbon dioxide levels, an semi-arid area, it's either the size of the Amazon or Alaska, I don't remember which, has greened in the last 15 years. Good. And so these are things you never hear. You have to ferret them out. Yeah. But as far as I can tell, if we got our act together and actually wanted it, instead of wanting to burn everything to the ground in an orgy of guilt-ridden self-destruction, we could set up a world in 15 years where absolutely everyone had plenty to eat and where obesity would be the primary problem. It's a good problem, actually. It's like, oh no, we have too much food. What are we going to do? That's a good problem. And where everyone was educated, because the cost of education is falling precipitously. And we could do that in a way that was actually beneficial to the environment, whatever that is. Yeah. So I would say fundamentally I'm optimistic. But if we want hell, we could certainly have that. And you might say, well, you don't want hell. It's like,
some people do.
Yeah, really, eh? You might want to ask yourself that question real seriously, because there's a part of you that would wreak vengeance on God for the catastrophic suffering of being. That's for sure. And that's Cain, right? So, no, I'm optimistic, because I also don't believe that our fundamental motivations are that of a corrupt will. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong factually, and I think it's an appalling claim philosophically, and it's a radically destructive claim ethically. Demoralizing, a terribly demoralizing claim, and demoralizing enough to really hurt people. Yeah. And I've seen many, many people, maybe thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people hurt by that claim, hurt to the deep recesses of their soul. But I would say, it depends. Depends on what you choose to do. Really, depends on what you choose to do. I read once, I think this was in a Solzhenitsyn novel, although it might not have been. And it's certainly not his idea. It's an idea from one of the church fathers, that God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Nice mathematical model of God. I like it a lot. But there's something about it that's really true. We interact with one another as if there's a spark of the divine within us, and you say, well, no, we don't. It's like, well, if you don't, then no one likes you. So, that'll be its own punishment, because we certainly do interact with the people we value when we're acting in a manner that we regard as appropriate, as if there is something about them that's of transcendent and, in some sense, eternal value. And you might say, well, you don't believe that. It's like, well, do you believe in natural rights? Because the notion of natural rights is predicated on that underlying presupposition or observation. And you don't believe in natural rights, well, then again, where are you exactly? And who are you exactly? And those are questions very much worth posing. And so I think that truth is more powerful than deceit by a large margin. And I think love is more powerful than hate by a large margin. I don't mean naive love, and I'm not naive about people. I don't mean that at all. But I think it is possible for us to rise above the resentment of our suffering and to wish the best for all things. And I think we can participate in that. And you do that, well, by extending your hand to your enemy to the degree you're capable of doing that, because who needs enemies? Or maybe you do, but it'd be better not to have them, I think, even if they're convenient targets to defeat. And then truth, well, that's the handmaiden of love. And that's something everyone can practice at every moment if they desire that. And that's an adventure. If you're acting deceitfully, you already specify the outcomes of your actions. And you pursue that. But the problem with that is it's predicated on the acceptance of your own authoritarian completeness. It's like, what the hell do you know about what you should have? And so what do you do instead? You just do your best to not lie and see what happens. And what happens are wonderful things, although perhaps not at the beginning, when there's a lot of mess to claw through. So sorry for the lengthy answer, but it was a complicated question.
Oh, man. Oh, God. I just love listening to him. And it's so true. Like, he's talking about, in order to tackle environmental issues, I don't know. Honestly, I believe the whole climate crisis thing gets blown a bit out of proportion. I just do. I don't, they've been saying for 60 years plus that the world's going to end in 10 years and it never does. Yes, I think that that we are causing some issues. I don't think it's to the extent that, Thunberg and that would have you believe. And so he's saying the best way to get people to care more about the environment is to lift them out of poverty, to make them richer. And yes, I believe that to be the case. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, not knowing if you're going to be able to feed your family from one week to the other, you cannot care about things outside of your immediate issues. So yes, making people better off is a way to let them then be concerned with other issues outside of their immediate situation. 100% agree with that. The problem at the moment is, certainly here in the UK, the government have their green agenda. And their green agenda is basically, it's making people poorer. And people are really struggling. Yeah, so energy prices are soaring. Costs of petrol and diesel are through the roof. Energy companies are planning on putting their prices up again. We just had a 54% price increase in this country in energy prices because the government lifted the cap on energy prices. So the energy companies immediately increased their prices by 54%, and they're making billions of pounds of profit off this. And everyday people are now having to choose between eating or heating, which is insane. We're in a developed first world country and more people than ever are having to use food banks, and you know, worrying about putting their heating on. Luckily, we're going into spring, summer now, so that will be a bit less, but then they're planning on putting their prices up again just before winter. So things are getting very difficult, and a big chunk of energy costs is so-called green tax. And this is money that the government want to put into sustainable energy sources. My main issue with these so-called sustainable energy sources is that they just cannot, we don't have the technology at the moment, they cannot generate enough energy. So people are being punished at the moment for this green agenda when the technology isn't there. It's not there yet. You know, a politician was talking on a radio station a little while ago about using wave energy. And the interviewer said, so how much energy can wave technology generate? And he said, it doesn't exist yet. And so she was like, what the hell are you talking about then? You know, if the technology doesn't exist yet, this is just a pipe dream. And, you know, it feels very much at the moment that people are getting punished for the green agenda, for governments to virtue signal. And the UK is responsible for less than 1% of CO2 emissions worldwide. Less than 1%. And our living standards are dropping because of that, because of less than 1%. And when you've got countries like China and India who are responsible for the most, and they're not signing up for this stuff, they're not signing up for this green agenda nonsense. And, you know, you may think that this is what it's going to take to save the world. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. But anyway, I'm going to stop now because honestly, it just makes me angry. It just makes me angry, and then I get upset. And, you know, there's nothing I can do about it. So there's no point getting upset about it. But anyway, bit random, but I love Jordan Peterson. That was a good video, a good lecture. I'd love to go and see him live myself one day. One day I will go and see him live when he tours. But anyway, sorry for ranting, honestly. I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll see you very soon.